Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. We are moving on to February, and so if you are just joining us, what I mean is we do our topics by month on the podcast, and we've been doing this for pretty much this year. And so one of the things that we've been looking at, we just finished our series in January, and with our series in January, we were talking about this idea of losing the noise, losing the overstimulation of winter break, losing the constant desire for more content, and moving towards formation and spiritual discipleship. And so now we are moving into the month of February, and I feel like this is probably one that if you've listened for a while, you're like, man, they talk about this a lot. But I feel like this is one of the most important things to talk about in youth ministry. And so we bring it up fairly regularly because we have new listeners regularly. And that is our theme for February, which is leading people, not programs. And so the idea behind it is students don't grow because of events. They only grow because of trusted adults, and the adults that take time and invest in them and show them and walk with them. It's the adults that make the change. It's the adults that lead them to Jesus. It's not the programs that you're running. And so with that, February is kind of a strange month in ministry. I don't know. I mean, David, it's definitely for me, but it's just this mindset that like the calendar really isn't fresh anymore. The back to school hype from winter break has kind of died. The hype is worn off, and leaders are kind of starting to ask, man, is this working? Are we actually making a difference? And so you kind of have to acknowledge the honest tension of that. And you're like, hey, look, programs are running. Students are showing up. We still are having good numbers. Or some of y'all might be like experiencing the basketball slump right now if you're a heavy basketball school where your attendance goes gone because of basketball being in full swing, or tennis starting up, or all the other things. And so students might be showing up, students might not be showing up, and volunteers, let's be honest, are tired. This is kind of the slump month of the spring where it's like, oh yay, February, Valentine's Day. Oh yeah, the Super Bowl happens in February. And other than that, like, you're just like, meh.
Yeah.
And so
Just waiting to get to spring break in March.
exactly. And so I've mentioned multiple times on here that I'm also a school chaplain. And I was chaplaining yesterday. And that was the thing that I heard more than anything else. I cannot wait for spring break. I cannot wait for spring break. I cannot wait for spring break. And in my mind, I'm like, you say that, but then you come back from spring break and the rest of the time in school is hard because you're like, now, oh, spring break was nice. I want summer. I want summer. I want summer. And so we're kind of just in this like never-ending process or never-ending cycle of like looking forward to this next big break. And students aren't like avoiding this either. Students are looking forward to the next big thing, this next big opportunity. Students might be losing interest or losing the excitement in your ministry because they know that like you're back into the mundane rhythm, and they're waiting for that next big thing, which for most people is mission trip or church camp or something to that nature. And so I guess kind of the framing question, though, for this episode, David, is if all of our programs disappeared tomorrow, so if Wednesday nights, if Sunday nights disappeared tomorrow, would any students still feel spiritually known and cared for?
It's a fantastic question. Um, yeah, it brings a lot of. It's almost a sobering question if you think about it. It's if your students are only experiencing and encountering Jesus on a Wednesday night, a Sunday morning, or a Sunday night, or whenever you meet, and they aren't being spiritually fed any other time, then their walk with Jesus goes out the window. If you don't have programs. And so we've talked a lot about it on the podcast, but this is exactly why we talk about having follow-up resources after a Wednesday night talk, stuff that helps them to dive a little bit deeper and stay stay devoted, and understanding that, we're talking about an hour or two on Wednesday night, an hour or two on a Sunday night, or whenever you meet. There's a lot more hours in the day, and a whole lot more when you consider a week or a month. And so, man, if you can honestly say that your students won't still feel spiritually cared for or fed without your programming, we need to do some work for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely I feel that. And I mean, in all honesty, if you're sitting here and you're like, man, like that's all I do. All I do is Wednesday night, or all I do is Sunday morning, or all I if we're honest, that's the structure of most churches too. And there might be some teams that work on the outside of the walls that do prayer, or maybe they go and build, or they go serve people here and there. But I guess the kind of questions that we need to be asking is like, what keeps you up right now as a student leader? Like, what are the things that we are like really, really like can't get away from thinking about? What are the needs that are needing to be addressed that we're sitting there and we're like, man, I really should do something about that.
And I think it's worth mentioning too, if you're that person like Brent had mentioned, like, oh man, that's all we really do. We don't say this to beat you up,
Yeah.
by any means. I think you haven't been in youth ministry long enough if you haven't had a moment where you go, oh, we should be doing more. Like, if you haven't had that moment of conviction, then you must be brand new, because
Yeah.
I think Brent and I can both say we feel it all the time.
Yeah.
That pressure. Going back to that question you asked, like, what are the things that keep you up at night? That moment when you're like, oh man, I forgot to talk about this, or oh man, I forgot to send that resource. Like, oh man, now that I say that, I do remember. Sunday night I said I would send them we did a prayer thing a couple of weeks ago, and I said I would send the slides because the students wanted those, and I totally dropped the ball on that.
Yeah.
Two
And
weeks
so,
later,
yeah.
so I will have to send that today. So it's
Yeah.
things like that. You're gonna remember those things.
Well, and
Don't beat yourself up.
it's one of those things, but then also there's the aspect of there's one family that's been real heavy on my heart this week, because 2 years ago we were walking through the death of their mom. And so it's just one of those things, is like on Monday in staff meeting, I brought up, I was like, hey, tomorrow is the 2 year anniversary. And it was a really, really big deal. And so that kid's been really, really heavy on my heart this week. And so I think it's one of those things that, like, when we start looking at this stuff, we need to be like, what is our default? Where do we go on things that we need to fix first? Are we fixing structures? Are we fixing program materials to where like everything works out, or are we thinking about the students that are actually in our room? And I think this is an important question to think about, because I think, if I'm honest, I think there is one question that is asked on youth ministry Facebook pages more than any other question, and that is, what curriculum has been working for you? What are some teaching ideas that you've done for your youth group that worked well? And my response is, if you're thinking of the programming instead of your students, you're looking at it the wrong way. You need to be looking at your students and asking your students and saying, hey, what are you dealing with right now that we need to be addressing, instead of asking a church that's in a completely different town, in maybe even a different state or country, asking what their kids are thriving on right now. It's probably not going to be the same.
And there's such a, I don't think there's anything wrong with the question, but I think there's a way to sort of restructure that question to say, hey, I was talking to my students and they said that they're really just struggling with just social relationships. They feel this
Yes.
pressure to to know how to date properly. Like, what does God say about dating? What's okay and what's not okay? And I don't want to just hear my parents say that I can't date till I'm 30. Like, I'm 15 years old. I want to date everybody else's kind of thing. Like, what does Scripture say about that? Then I could take it to the youth ministry page and say, hey, my students are asking questions about godly relationships. What curriculums have you guys seen or used or developed that worked good for your group that I could
Yes.
look at? Now we're sort of we're zooming in on an actual problem that your students are facing, and now we can help you with a specific problem instead of like identity, flesh, Jesus, sin. Like all the the big things that we always go to.
Yeah. No, and I totally agree. And I think that's one of the dynamics that we have to look at. But even how you just did that, you recentered the focus of your question into relational first. You went and talked to the students, and then you figured out what was needed, and then you went and sought resource. And that's totally fine. I genuinely am one that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are some phenomenal youth pastors out there and some content creators out there that have written great resources. And quite honestly, that's their skill set, and they're utilizing that skill set. It's okay if you use someone else's stuff. You do need to organize it and structure it to where it fits your youth group. And I think that's the huge aspect of the relational part. But I think the big thing with this is we have to kind of recenter our focus to the role of relationships. And looking back, at least in my youth ministry, and for the listener listening to this, I would challenge you to do the same. If I look back to my youth pastor, I can think of probably 3 lessons over the course of the 4 or 5 years that I had him that I remember him teaching. And they were all visual illustrations that I remember more than the actual lesson. So with that, why is my youth pastor important? Because he invited me into his home. He showed up. He was relational. He wrote me letters at camp. He did things to invest in my life that ultimately pushed me where I am right now. And so with that, the letters and like that investing and that personal relationship is huge. I don't remember hardly anything he taught me, but I knew he loved Jesus, and I knew Jesus was an important figure to follow. And so I did the digging, and I figured out, and I learned things from him, sure, but like the relationship came first. I saw the value of Jesus through his life and through the lives of others, and that made me want to pursue Jesus more. So I want to really, really clearly say this. Programs are not bad. Structure is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, you will not get anything done. Events have a place and a purpose. They can be a huge catalyst for what you're doing. But they are containers, not conduits. But so with that, like they are the container that you can use to use and build relationships, but they are not the conduit. Relational ministry is not being every student's best friend. It is not constant emotional availability. It is not chaos without boundaries. The way that I think of relational youth ministry is like good relational ministry is good parenting. Bad relational ministry is parenting like when you're their friend more than their parent. And it's just this mindset of relational ministry is consistent, not constant. That's a huge difference. Consistent presence. It is emotional safety. It is spiritual attentiveness. You pay attention. You are there regularly. You allow a sense of safety. And there's different ways that you can go through this. Me and David actually operate on completely different structures of this side. David is one that can 100% dive into the empathy and get into the feels and do all the things well. As far as that goes, he can sit there with that student and he can absolutely just be there in that moment of grief or frustration or angst or whatever. And then I am completely on the opposite side, which is really like I had a student tell me something one time that I just couldn't help but laugh because it's me, but I still find it as a huge compliment. She said, yeah, when I feel bad about something or when I feel bad about myself, I go to someone else so they'll feel bad with me, and then I go to Brent to fix it. And so it's just this mindset, like,
I know exactly which student that was too.
I am much more logistically minded. I'm more administratively minded. I fix things, and that's just my personality. But like, both sides of that spectrum work. Both sides of that spectrum are relational ministry. Relational ministry is not a cut and paste thing. It focuses on those three things: consistent presence, emotional safety, and spiritual attentiveness.
I
So,
would even include, like, I think that is what makes our directing team at camp work so well.
yeah,
Is Shauna is, if you don't know, Shauna is co-youth pastor with Brent. She handles all the administrative stuff. She does such a phenomenal job, like cabin assignments and knowing who is where and putting small groups together and all of that. Brent sees the oversee of it, and I mostly see worship, but we all help out with worship. But the beautiful thing about it is, with all these different personalities, we have other people on the team, but as far as people you guys have seen on the podcast before, you have all these different personalities, and it can really be helpful because we're dealing with so many different type of students who are coming from different walks of life, people who are going through different things. Part of the reason why I can emotionally relate to students is because I've seen a few things. It goes back to the old commercial of we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. And everybody is that way. But it's like the way that God has wired me, and I think of like specific situations of a student that it's funny looking back on it now, but I think of a particular kid that kind of him and Brent were really like oil and water. And Brent was so patient and so kind, but it was driving him crazy. You could see it in his eyes. And so I just kind of took him aside and said, "Hey, man, let's talk through this. Let's work through this." And basically said everything that Brent said, but in a way that I basically spoke the kid's language. And he goes, "Oh, okay." And I don't think we had like a whole lot of problems with him after that. It was just that this kid needed to be spoken to in a different way. And so the point in bringing all that up isn't to pat myself on the back. It's to go, you need people on your team who check different boxes than you. Like if I'm the emotional center, I need a Brent on my team who can say, okay, let's land the plane. Let's be consistent. Let's, all the different things like that. I need people like that on my team I need someone who can cook really, really well. I need somebody who loves thinking about the bigger picture of how to feed a big number of students. It's not my wiring. And so when you have different gifts and different personalities and stuff on your team, you get to reach more people, and that also gives you the opportunity to equip your volunteers to do more.
yeah.
I'm getting a little ahead of where we're going.
No, you're good.
But I wanted to sort of lay that foundation before we get there.
Well, and I think that's important. And I think another thing that, like, with this is, like, you cannot be the relational person for everybody. So with that being said, I think what David said is really, really important. And if you have a staff member, so if you're at a larger church, and I say larger church, I'm not at a huge church and I have a staff member for some reason. I'm super blessed. But it's just one of those things. If you don't have that extra person that you can hire to be completely different than you, then find volunteers that are. You can always go and handpick your team of volunteers. I know volunteers can be difficult as far as finding them sometimes. And then like just recruiting the right ones. Sometimes it's just like, hey, you're breathing. You don't mind working with youth? Great. Like, you're the only one that said yes. And so that's understandable, but like you can still intentionally work towards building that group of volunteers. If you don't, then just ask parents and be like, hey, I don't need you to come in as a leader, like where you lead curriculum or anything to that nature, but can I have you come in as just a relational person? Can I come in? Can I have you come in and just literally work on relationships?
I've done that. Like one thing I did specifically is I had a group of basketball kids. I had like 7 at one point.
Yeah.
At a former church I was at, and they just all they wanted to do was play basketball. Like I don't know if they cared anything about worship or anything else that we did. They just wanted to play
Yeah.
basketball. That's not my skill set. 100%, I'm the world's worst basketball player. You can quote me on that. But I had an adult who loved basketball, and he spoke the language. He had sneakers. I mean, the whole thing. Very, very good at basketball. He played all the way through college. Somebody that these boys could really look up to. And so I just said, hey, man, I'm not asking you to be at everything. What I'm asking, at the very least, if you could show up in the hour we have before youth and just hang out with them. And then if you don't want to stay for youth, that's fine. You can go. Or if you want to stay, you can. Or if you need to take a break for a little bit, go eat something. And then right after youth, for that 15, 20 minutes or whatever that they play basketball, go play with them again. You don't even have to show up to anything else other than go and play basketball with them. He's like, no, I'll do everything. But I was like, hey, but if you're not willing to do that, just being there in those fellowship time moments, you might not think that it's important, but I would argue they'll remember that you played basketball with them every day way before they'll remember anything that I said that night.
Yeah.
If they went home to their parents and said, hey, what'd you learn at youth? They might go, I played basketball. Matt had a really cool shot. He taught me how to do this thing. And it's like, oh, really? That's cool. That's what they're going to care about.
Yeah.
And Matt's going to have an opportunity to reach those boys in a way that I never could.
Mm-hmm. No, without a doubt. And there's huge importance to that. And so, like I said, I want to say it again, just the mindset of you cannot be relational for everybody. You can know everybody's name. You can stay invested and stay interested in what they talk about. But you cannot be the relational person for every single person in your group because you will clash with somebody. Your mentality, your personality will hit. And so find people that complement you and have different skill sets and different personalities than you that still have a love for Jesus. It's absolutely huge. And that just kind of moves towards like the whole relational mindset moves towards the structure biblically too. I mean, you look at Jesus's model was relational. Before it was instructional. What did Jesus do? Jesus didn't teach for 10 years and then bring disciples with him after he picked the best from the group. He found the 12 and then they learned as they went. He picked the 12, and so Mark 3:14, he appointed the 12 that they might be with him. Formation came after presence. Jesus didn't mass produce disciples. He stayed close. He corrected gently most of the time, and invested deeply. Like, the dude had so many just opportunities to where they were just doing life together, and he was like, oh, hey, by the way, you know this thing that we just did? I want to teach you about that. That's all relational ministry is. So Paul echoes this in 1 Thessalonians 2:8. Says, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. Discipleship happens in proximity. Truth travels best along relational trust. They want to know how much you care before they care about what you know. So, question for leaders that are listening to this, or maybe this is a question that you take back to your volunteers. Who are you currently sharing your life with, not just lessons? What students are you investing in? And I think there's a solid understanding behind that. You know, Jesus didn't mass produce disciples. In fact, if you look at Jesus' structure, it goes 12, 3, 1. And so you might have a reach of 12 to, I'd say 12 to 15 is probably healthy. If your group's bigger than that, you need more than one person. And then you challenge them to go find theirs. And if they overlap, that's fine. But you have your 12 to 15, and those are the kids that you follow, you pay attention to, you know what they're doing, you know most of the ins and outs of their lives, and you check in with them. You have 3 that are your disciples, like the ones that you are intentionally going after and focusing on hard. And you allow those 3 to become transformational because they go out and they start serving the youth group too. And then you have the one that is your sole and primary focus. And that's the closest relational one you have. And obviously with this, I want to be careful and say we could do a whole podcast episode on having the right boundaries and having the right relationships and not letting things go where they don't need to go. And we probably need to do that at some point. But have boundaries set before you get too far in relationships.
Yeah.
You even with that one, even with that three, you don't meet alone.
No, never.
You never
Yeah,
meet at
I
someone's
actually
house. Yeah, I mean,
have a really good story about that very specific thing. I have the. I'm going to call it an honor because that's exactly how I feel, and Brent knows. So when I came here, one of the selling one of the selling points for coming to Sweetwater was that I would get to work with Tyler, our pastor. We did ministry together for 5 years in Canyon. We were co-youth pastors essentially. I was more his associate youth pastor, but we treated it very much like a co-thing, like we do now. Now he's my senior pastor, but one of the cool things about it was when I had interviewed, there was this really cool opportunity afterwards. So I did that first interview, and then I went over to their house, and we had some dinner. My wife and son and I, and with them, and Anna, their oldest, was a junior at the time, and she didn't know that I was coming to interview. So she shows up. She's like, "Oh, David's here," and I've always kind of had that uncle relationship with them, and she said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And told her that I had interviewed for the job, and the look on her face was like pure joy. And she said, "I never told you this, but I've always wanted you to be my youth pastor." I looked at Kelsey and was like, "I'm sold." It was one of those really cool moments, a full circle moment. Getting to see her grow up as a little girl and getting to invest in her life, and then knowing I would get a year or two, or I guess 2 years to invest in her before she graduates high school. And so anyway, I say all that to say this. So this last Sunday night, we had Stephen Gehring, who was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. We had his incredible seminar. It was awesome. That and naturally invoked a lot of questions. We were talking about the dangers of social media and technology. Whew, slow down, David. I try to push through these things. I'm sorry, guys. But that naturally led to a lot of questions. Well, I look up and pretty much everyone was gone, except for her dad, who was talking to one other person. And so I was like, "Ooh, I need to start wrapping this conversation up because I'm about to lose adults." And so then Tyler was like, "Hey, see ya. Don't stay out too late," kind of thing. And part of that just comes down to the trust that he has with me and her boyfriend was there too, who's also in our youth ministry. But I was like, "All right, guys, we got to start working our way outside." And immediately my brain goes to safe sanctuary. We got to be in an open place and look over and it's like, "Oh, everybody's leaving. Got to wrap up," And so that's a natural boundary that comes with that. And so we were talking. She was just like, "But I don't want to stop talking. Like, this is a really good conversation and I'm getting a lot of life out of it." And I was like, "Man, that's awesome. And I'm glad that you're getting life out of that. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take your journal and I want you to just write down any other questions that you have. So that way you remember and keep it in all of that. And then next time we see each other, we'll dive in a little bit more," kind of situation." She was like, "I can't wait," because she's nearly 18. She'll be 18 in May. And she was like, "I can't wait till I'm an adult and it won't matter anymore." And I was like, "Okay, again, I hear you, but you're still a girl and I'm still a man."
Yeah.
And I'm married one of that and all
Yeah.
of that stuff. And you have to think, though there's nothing there by any means, and we are like family in a lot of ways, there's still very important and healthy boundaries that have to be here.
Yeah.
And even when you're no longer a kid in youth ministry to the point where you feel like there always has to be lots of adults around,
Yeah.
we still have to have those boundaries.
Sure.
No matter how old you get, because it's really, really important for your safety more than anything else.
Yeah.
And she was like, "But I'm safe around you." And I was like, It still did, you know,
Yeah.
and it's one of those things. And I bring that up because, you know, sometimes students, you know, you do have a great relationship with a student. And the student goes, but I want to keep talking. And you're like, okay, that's great. Don't lose that. Write it down. We'll go. We'll take a moment and we'll talk later,
Yeah.
more on it. Or if you want to text me or whatever. Not tonight. It's too late to be texting. You know, again, another boundary I place is after a certain hour, do not text students. Period.
Yeah.
You know, we can pick up the conversation later, or if you need to go get coffee or whatever, you know, we can go to the coffee shop and meet back at the church, or you know, we
Yeah.
can both get coffee and meet at the church where there's other people around, you know, kind of thing. And she goes, okay. I mean, she was like, so we're really never going to get to a no, no, ma'am. That's part of keeping it safe and having those boundaries.
Well,
Are
and
really,
I
really
think
important.
with that, the dangers of it, and I mean, I've definitely been in situations before where I've even had that thought of like, I mean, there's nothing that's ever going to happen. But I think that the important safeguard that you have to understand is when, like, our primary point of our job is, well, two things: caring for people and pointing people to Jesus. When that's our focus and that's our primary responsibility, you don't know what person, what a person's walking out of when they come and talk to you. And so caring can be misconstrued as, oh wow, they really like me, or oh wow, I really like them, really really quickly. And it happens with adults too, but students don't have that disconnect. And so, like, literally, like, there are reasons that that safeguard exists, because you don't want to be putting yourself into a situation where you know that there's nothing there, but it doesn't mean that they won't.
The other side of it too, that doesn't mean that somebody else won't. There's always an appearance,
Yeah.
you know, and you always have to be, if you're not constantly thinking of what might happen, you are underprepared.
Yeah.
I literally, and some people would say, man, these pastors are really paranoid. And I was like, have you watched the news? We gotta be. One
Yeah.
accusation. One accusation can ruin a life, whether
Yeah.
it's true or not. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
It's your word against
And
theirs,
so,
and you will lose.
exactly, you will 100% lose. And so, yes, I do think we need to have that episode at some point, because I do know that there are some churches now where I'm really grateful we're in the Methodist denomination that, really, I mean, it's a massive deal. It's not a small thing. It's something we do trainings constantly over it, because it's important.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do know that there are some churches that don't even have those conversations,
Yeah.
that don't have a lot of safeguards, and
Yeah.
you might be one of those. And so I have no problem having straight up safe sanctuary training in the podcast, you know.
Well, and now that
situation.
that might be a good one to bring Melissa back for as well.
That'd be an amazing one. She's got some really cool thoughts and resources
So,
and stuff like
yeah,
that comes with that.
When we
Especially being
say
a Girl Scout
when
leader.
we say that, like, these podcasts aren't scripted, we legitimately mean that we just kind of go off the cuff and talk. We do have notes, but like most of the time we're literally planning as we go, like we just did. That'd probably be a good episode. Yeah, Melissa would be a great fit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mental note to self.
yeah, exactly. But so going back into this, just this idea of, like, you know, programs. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm not saying they're not important. But I'm saying, like I said earlier, the idea is they're containers and not conduits. And so programs should support relationships. Programs should create space for connection. And they should give rhythm to discipleship. But they become dangerous when it replaces knowing students, when it becomes the measure of your success, and then also when it consumes all of your energy as a leader. If all of your energy goes into the programs, and I feel like I probably should just clarify what is program when I mean program. Program is anything and everything that you plan on a Wednesday night. And I want to specific that, because sometimes worship can be part of your program. Worship can be so planned out and so structured and so leadership energy draining, because it's just part of everything that you're planning for that like you kind of begin to lose the sense and the focus of worship. So be really, really careful. And Everything that you plan from the time that students come in your door to the time that students leave is part of your program. Okay? So your programming is all that you do within the hours that you meet with kids. So don't let programs become dangerous. Programs need to be a support structure. Okay? So a kind of helpful way to build this mindset is programs should introduce students to people, not replace people. A great night doesn't have a guarantee of a formed heart. A quiet leader conversation may carry way more eternal weight than a flawless event. Something that we do in our youth group. We do 4 worship songs a night. However, we open with 3. We split for our ministries. 6th grade goes by themselves with their leaders. 7th and 8th goes with Shauna, my associate youth pastor, and I have high school. We do our different teaching and different lessons, and then we come back together and we close in worship. I am perfectly okay if one of my groups doesn't come back for closing worship because their conversation is fine. That needs to take precedence over being on time. Now, granted, with respect to parents, because there's a lot of youth pastors that I've met over the years that are like, oh, well, we ran an hour overboard because the Spirit was just moving. I'm sorry. Like, that's great. But at the end of the day, like, you're going to lose investment of parents because parents have schedules too. And that, like, you have to be respectful in that mindset. And like David did, there's a time and there's a safe way to cut off conversations and be like, hey, we're going to pick this up next week. This has been phenomenal. Make sure you write down any and all questions you have so we can keep going on this next week. Plain and simple. But if you're having parents waiting in the parking lot for an hour because you don't want to slow down, like, the conversation, there has to be a give in there. 10 minutes, possibly 15 minutes is okay. But like when you get into the 30 minutes or more of parents waiting on you, it's not okay.
And if that's happening consistently,
yes,
you might need to sit down with your leaders and your parents and say, hey, is there a benefit in maybe extending our ministry? Like if your cutoff is typically 7 o'clock and you're going to like 7:10, 7:15, and you just need that extra buffer time, that doesn't necessarily mean that if they say, yeah, well, why don't you go ahead and go to 7:30, that we now go to 7:45.
Yeah.
Like, like if you give yourself a little bit more buffer,
yeah,
then I think you still strive to try to push for 7:10 or whatever, because then they've given you an extra 30 minutes. That was a gracious gift that the parents and leaders gave you, and your students are investing. So maybe pay that back by going, hey, okay, we're done at 7:10. We got out early, whatever else like that. So there's still good, consistent communication, and your parents and your students and your volunteers see that there's intentionality there, where we're going, I probably need that extra 10, 15 minutes, but I'm not going to just take it just because I have it. Kind of situation. If you can be done, they feel like they get out a little bit early. There still feels like there's a little bit of a give and take, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Hopefully I explained that.
Well, okay. And the other thing to take into consideration is that works well if you are a ministry that meets solely by yourself on that night. Like for instance, if I might be wrong, David, but your Sunday nights are when y'all primarily do your stuff, and y'all are the only ones up there, if not close to the only ones up there.
We are.
My structure is completely different. We meet on Wednesdays, and our entire church does ministry on Wednesday nights. And so for the parents that are in adult community groups, for the kids that are in children's ministry, because your youth kids probably have siblings, like hitting that timeline is important. Vital. Because otherwise you are making the rest of your rest of the family wait on you. And like, you can probably clarify your conversations more, or you can remove things and restructure your program to where you allow more time for that to be. For instance, we don't do games on Wednesday nights. We meet for an hour and 35 minutes. We solely do worship and lesson on Wednesday nights. That's it. Like, there is no game, there's no activity. We do activity nights, but they're on Saturday nights or Sunday nights, where we have more time, we have the availability to be out longer, no one else is here. And so utilizing those opportunities for that extra need is okay. But Wednesday nights, we are very, very dialed in. We have a rhythm, we have a method, and we focus on what's important on those nights, and we get done on time.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point too, like, so our Wednesday nights are our family worship, and so we call it refuel. And basically, the way that it works is, everybody is there, and so we kind of have this unspoken rule that when the kids are done and they come down, everybody stops. Even if you're right in the middle of it, like, you can kind of wrap up your conversation or whatever. The kids are here, there's no opportunity because it's all in our fellowship hall, and the kids, they go up to the kids area. The youth have really enjoyed the conversations, like the roundtable conversations with the adults, so we've actually been kind of mixed in there, which has been really cool. A lot of our adults do a phenomenal job of investing in the kids and youth.
Yeah.
That's not always something everywhere you go, but for us, that's a huge blessing. And but once the kids show up in the fellowship hall, we're all kind of like it's funny. It's like clockwork. You hear them coming down the stairs, even though they're on the other side of the church. You can hear them.
Yeah.
And so there's always one person who says it loud enough where everybody hears it. And they're like, "All right, everybody, pray out," because we know, hey,
Yeah.
they're coming. Time to pray. And so yeah.
No,
It goes back to the relational aspect of this podcast episode: is know the dynamics, know the people, know that. When the kids show up, it's time to wrap it up.
100%. That's it. And so, how do you practice relational faithfulness? That's kind of our closing on this, the closing thought that we need to get through before we do hit our close. We're inviting leaders into small, doable shifts. You're probably not going to get a leader if you just say, "Hey, do you want to come upstairs and help?" Because most of them are like, "What does that mean? What is the time frame on that? How do I help? What do I help with? Are there students involved, or is this just parents?" Like, there are so many questions that did not get answered.
Am I teaching a class?
Yes. There are so many questions and so many what ifs that most parents and most leaders will not agree to, "Hey, will you help upstairs?" because they don't know what you're asking. So invite leaders into small, doable shifts, not massive overhauls. One of the things that we do is we have small group leaders, and we specifically ask our small group leaders to commit to 6 months. We prefer a year, but 6 months is the minimum, because we explain the importance of relationships and how relationships have to be built. They are not just there when you get started. And building those relationships is vitally important to students understanding and practically applying the gospel to their lives. And so we are very, very clear on that. Is like, I need at least a 6-month commitment. We would love you to be here for 4 or 5 years. And so most of our leaders jump on and they get on board and they're doing great. We have some that have not done as well. And so recognizing and clarifying that really, really clearly is great. Also, there's 3 other things that are huge. Be a name-based ministry. Fewer students known deeply is better than many students known vaguely. That's why that goes back to the 1, 3, 12 thing that I was talking about earlier. The more volunteers you have, the bigger your youth group can be, because then you have more volunteers to find their 12, focus on their 3, and build their 1. Okay? So names communicate dignity as well. When you call them by name, they see value in themselves, and they see the importance of the relationship that you have with them, because they're like, "Oh, you know my name." Okay? There's a ton of ways to get around that. I know a lot of people are like, "Well, I'm not good with names." Take a picture of that kid in your phone and write their name on the photo and leave an album of pictures on your phone. If you have a church database, like we use Planning Center, we take pictures of every kid. So when we're doing check-ins, if we don't remember their name, we can go by their face. And then when we find their face, we see their name, and then we're like, "Hey, what's up?" It works.
Pro tip there. Don't just take their picture. Tell them why you're taking the picture.
Yeah. Well, I do that, but like that is a good point.
Well, I know, but you didn't. I was like, just
Just
in case
walk
there's somebody
around
here
taking
that goes,
pictures of
"Oh,
kids."
okay, great. They're like taking pictures and just they're like, what are you doing? Why? Because I guarantee you take a picture, a student's going to ask where it's going.
Yeah.
Or they're going to ask to see the picture too. So it's like one of those things where I'm
Yeah.
like, all right, hey, we're gonna take a picture so that we can put it in our database. And what I did was like, okay, you know, do you like the way you look? You know, because that matters
Yeah.
with teenagers. And then, show them the picture, make sure they're cool with it. And they're like, oh yeah, I love that picture.
Yeah.
You know, and it adds more relation. You also see the students that go, I really could care less, just take the picture.
Yeah.
But you also have, so oh, this is a student that cares about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I now building a little bit more with them.
And we have
Simple, guys.
and
It
we
doesn't
have
have to be
yeah,
hard.
we have a few kids that care about that, and then we have other kids that, like, when I said, hey, I'm taking a picture for the directory, like, will you smile? They go,
Yeah,
or
they
do
refuse.
some kind of goofy face or something of that nature. And I'm like, all right, that's
Always
fine. It's going to be in our
Always
database.
goofy.
Like, that's your
I'm like,
picture.
the whole church can see this,
Yes.
by the way.
Yeah. But so with that, name-based ministry is important. Names bring identity and value, and they see that they are important. I already talked about this one. Consistent adult presence. Have the same leaders for longevity. Do not have a new leader every week. Same leader, same group, long term. If you have a structure like mine where you do 6th and then 7th and 8th grade and then high school, do your best to work into the nature to where your leader moves up with that kid. Okay? Super, super easy sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't work. But having that opportunity for volunteers to gradually move up with their kids is huge and super important. And then last, follow up as discipleship. Text them after a hard week. Remember their prayer request and follow up with them. Presence outside of the program, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever you do. Presence outside of the program. Text them, share stuff with them. Nowadays, a lot of the kids, I just share Instagram reels with them and they think that's the best thing in the world. But I'm intentional on who I send what to because I know who they are and I know what they find funny. And so a lot of times I just shoot Instagram reels to kids because I think that they'll think it's funny or I think they'll find meaning or value in it, especially the church or religious centered ones. When it talks about different dynamics of faith and stuff like that or worship or anything, I am very, very intentional on who I send those to what kid, because if I have a kid that's like struggling with identity and I see this really, really strong short reel on like why your identity is important, I'm going to send it to that kid because that's how they do things. And that's super, super important. We talked about the whole like social media is dangerous. And it is. Like ultimately I'd love for every kid to be off of it. But at the end of the day, we can utilize what we have for good too. So with that, it's okay if you're tired. You don't have to out-create culture. You can't. You are called to out-love it. I don't know if this would be considered a commissioning or if you just want to hear these and try to like go out with these. But faithfulness is more important than flash. Presence is more important than performance. At the end of the day, nobody cares. Like your students do not care if you deliver a perfect lesson because in all reality, most of them are still like, huh? What'd we talk about? They might get some things, and it's really, really cool when you speak and talk about something and it clicks with a student. But for every student that it clicks with, there's probably 10 to 15, if we're honest, that are like, you said that today? Huh. Okay. Well, cool, I guess. Like, I mean, and that's the conversation. And then finally, shepherding is more important than scaling. And when I say scaling, I'm talking about scaling your ministry or scaling the growth of your programs or anything to that nature. So shepherding, caring for the ones you have is more important than finding the ones that you don't. I've always said that, and there's different youth pastors that do different ways. And I'm not saying that like if you're an evangelistic youth ministry, that's not a good thing. But I've always said I find more value and more credibility and more intentionality in discipling the ones that I have and equipping the ones that I have so they go out and disciple the ones that I don't. Because at the end of the day, we are called to make disciples who make disciples, not bring everybody into our program. Jesus didn't operate in that function. We don't either. Okay? Jesus could have snapped his fingers and been like, hey, church service now, and all the people came. He didn't. He picked 12. That number gradually grew and gradually grew and gradually grew and gradually grew. But it wasn't because Jesus did it all. Jesus invested in the 12, and those 12 went and invested in more, and then those invested in more, and those invested in more, and discipleship changed the world.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think this is let's end on prayer one.
Yeah.
So,
Agreed.
Yeah, so let's do that. First off, before I close us in prayer, because I'm just going to literally turn it off after I finish praying, we love that you guys listen. We're super, super grateful for everybody that does listen. If you do want to help us out, you can share this podcast with your youth pastor friends. We'd love to hear from you too. You can share it on social media at Talk Student Men, or you can reach out to us at Talk Student Men on Facebook and Instagram. But let me pray over the leaders that are listening to this episode. God, we thank you for today. We thank you for the leader that's listening. We thank you for the fact that the leader knows who you are. And God, maybe that leader feels tired today. Maybe that leader is close to getting on the verge of falling back into burnout. Or maybe that leader is just been an off week. Either way, we thank you for the fact that you show time and time again that they are loved, that they are cared for, and that your presence is still there. I pray for the leaders that feel unseen. I pray for the leaders that feel unheard. God, I just pray for courage in these leaders to find the value of slow fruit. Slow fruit is better than no fruit. And God, I just pray that as we begin to move towards this idea of relationships over programs, or maybe we've been doing this for a while and we just need to refocus. I pray for eyes of the leaders and their students to notice what God is already doing. Because if they are teaching your word, then you are moving in their midst. We thank you for the youth pastor that's listening to this. And God, I just pray that you will give them a special peace, a special comfort, to know that they're doing what you called them to do. And God, I just pray that allows them to do another day, do another week, do another month, or just continues to allow them to remain focused on you and your mission for them. We thank you for this time together. We thank you for this episode and the conversations that hopefully come out of it. And God, we just pray that your spirit moves through this episode and moves through this conversation and begins to change how we see things to where we can focus and go back to your mindset of being relational over programmatic. You called 12, and those 12 changed the world. Allow us to focus our time and effort on relationships like you did. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.